Welcome, everyone. This is Rashad with the T.R.O.N podcast, The Randomness of Nothing. Across the pond in London, UK, we have an entrepreneur. Don't let the baby face fool you. He's a killer. We have Mr. Gleston Mendonca. Thank you, sir, so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this platform. I appreciate it, brother.
No, I appreciate your time. So, I'm stunned, honored, and wish I was as ambitious as you were at such a young age, because your accomplishments, man, I saw the awards you won. I don't want to tell your story. It's best to come from you.
Sure. So for your viewers, I'm 19 years old. And fun enough, I just turned 19 about in August. I'm August baby for those people out there.
Yeah.
And I come from humble beginnings. My parents were actually from India. That's what my heritage is, from the Indian background. But if we go back far in the lineage tree, that we're Portuguese. We're part of that place in India called Goa. That's
Okay.
where. So my parents actually immigrated into London at such a decently young age, but they had me and they couldn't afford me. It was way too much money to raise a child where their current circumstances were.
Yeah.
So for 1 year when I was younger, from the age of 3 months to a year and 3 months, I was with my grandma. So I stayed in India for a year. That's where I grew up learning the language as well, the Indian language. And from that point onwards, I looked at how hard my parents struggled. So as I grew older, we're going back a couple years now, which seems not so long for some people, but it feels like a lifetime ago for me.
Right.
I decided I was doing my A-levels. So it's like college exams, sort of. It's like when you're 17 or 18,
Okay.
and then you go into there's those exams.
Right.
And just while I'm revising, I took economics as one of my subjects, and I'm like, this is not teaching me anything about taxes or money, or the most interesting subject was fractional reserve banking. Other than that, and that was like 1% of the whole course.
Right.
And so that made me realize that, look, I want to retire my parents. I see how hard they're working.
Right.
But me, so young, so I was 17 when I finished college, and I said, look, none of my friends are business oriented. Even my parents aren't either. What does it take? So then I done some networking, and I spoke to a friend. He said, you need a mentor. Then I went mentor hunting, as they say.
Right.
So for 3 months, I got a job as a barista, making 1,600 a month. That was my best ever.
Right.
And that was my first month.
So you said you're a barista. So we're over here on the U.S. side. I think that's like the equivalent of like working at Starbucks as a coffee.
Starbucks coffee, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I was a coffee maker.
Yeah. There's no shame in it, you know what I mean? So, but you had higher aspirations.
%. Yeah. And with that being said, even in barista, when I was working, I would network with people, because the type of coffee shop I was working at, we would have Harry Styles come in or Emma Thompson come in as well.
Wow.
So we had these sort of celebrities come in. So I already knew I was on that higher frequency, higher vibration. But then when I was doing this barista job, I went to 3 to 4 networking events a week. And then
That's
I
awesome.
said, you know what? Find a mentor. Found one, and it was the best one in the world, honestly. It was actually one of Bob Proctor's mentees. If you know Bob Proctor, he's very big in Canada, very big on mindset.
Right. Passed away at the age of 87, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, you know him very well. But that's what happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then, so what were you mentored in? Was it just about success? Lack to make sure you're not having procrastination issues. It's never too early to be successful, because being at 19, you obviously decided right away that you needed to seek out people that knew more than you.
Yeah, 100%. So I was mainly mentored in 4 main skills, and these skills are so essential for any sort of business.
Right.
So, funny story, before I actually joined my mentor, and God has a massive role to play, which we can jump into a bit later if you like. Right. I actually put down a £250 deposit for a property mentor that I was going to start at the end of last year, September.
Okay.
And I said, you know what? I want to be versatile in all different industries. I want to have a skill set that can apply to real estate or sales, or even all sorts. It could be even AI, for example.
Absolutely.
So I got what I wanted. The 4 main skills that I was trained in was, first of all, networking, because your network. Second thing is sales.
Yes.
So get the money in. 3 is community building, and 4 is leadership. Those are my main 4 skills that I got. alongside with the mindset. So a lot of people don't understand this or don't know this, but our subconscious mind has a massive role to play in our everyday life. Like 96 to 98% of our whole day is purely subconscious. So that means that's where our results are. So I got trained in this, and my subconscious programming got changed over time.
Right.
And that was a massive factor, because you can have all the skill set, but if your mindset's not there, forget it. You're not going to achieve anything.
So when people describe a subconscious mindset, can you just get a little deeper? Because maybe people wouldn't know what that is.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So for example, breathing or blinking, that's something that we do on automatic. That's what we call, like, it's a habit. So something that we have a habit is something that it happens as an automatic. Okay.
Right.
You don't, without conscious awareness of you doing it. Breathing, thinking, I'm not thinking, but actually thinking is quite subconscious as well for most people.
Right.
It's just an autopilot programming.
Right.
So those habits are actually in our subconscious mind. And with that being said, it's a concept called the paradigm. And a lot of people don't know what the paradigm is. But the paradigm, in other words, is a section of your subconscious mind that a group of habits or a multitude of habits are placed.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, is those paradigms, we have hundreds, by the way. They are developed either in our little life, from the day we were born, and even genetics as well. And those are the habits that are formed. And there's only two ways to form it. Is one by an emotional impact, or like a big shock, someone dying or something happening.
Right.
And also two, the constant spaced repetition, i.e. repeating the same thing. So you brush your teeth every day, hopefully twice a day. That is an automatic program that you set. So you're probably right-handed as a dominant hand. Am I correct?
Absolutely, 100%.
We'll try with the non-dominant hand. You'll find out how something.
It's bad. It's bad, man. It's even like you realize you have to hold the paper different. You have to, like, because you have to curl your hand. I mean, then you're like, oh, it's funny though, because I eat with my left hand though, right? It's weird. I eat with my left hand. I can't eat right-handed. And, but as far as I just decided to do it as a kid because I saw everybody at the table eating right-handed. I'm like, I'm going to switch to left hand. And I can't eat right-handed now.
Well, that's because, and from that point onwards, you decided to make that decision, do it as a habit because you constantly done it. And then guess what? You can do it with your left hand, but do everything else with your right.
Yeah.
That's the way.
So you got your mentor, you're going to these network adventures. It's very ambitious for anybody, let alone a teenager. So what industry did you get into to ultimately be able to branch out on your own?
Very good question. So I've had 3 different companies over the past time that I've been in business.
That's awesome.
And it taught me a lot of lessons. But the first industry that I went into was network marketing. And those who don't know, it's just basically direct sales. I wanted to put my sales knowledge into practice, because applied knowledge is power. A lot of people say knowledge is power, but it's nonsense. Applied knowledge is power.
Right.
And so with that, exactly. So with that being said, let's go into sales. Let's go into direct sales. And within within 6 weeks, I hit 5 figures a month very quickly with my mentor.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
And from that point onwards, I decided, you know what? Let's start my own other company. So some other people from that previous business wanted to join me, and we started a trading company. Trading was quite an interesting one, because trading, you need a very, very big disciplinary mindset when it comes to trading, because we were more like gamblers, and honestly, we were more like gamblers. However, our business model was fairly simple. We would outsource our trading since we weren't professionals. We had traders who are over a decade of experience, and with being said, we would just do it very simply. We would just transfer the signals that we would receive from our own traders and then create a business and do a subscription. It lasted pretty well, but then this was one of the main lessons, is that this is the difference. A lot of people say they want to be a business owner, but then they have their own business, but they're working in it as if it's in a job. So you're self-employed. A lot of people don't understand the misconception between being a business owner and being self-employed. Someone who's self-employed is when the business doesn't generate money if you're not working in the business.
Okay.
A business owner is someone who has set up the systems so that it automatically give out the skills, and without, for example, the CEO of some hotels are probably in the Bahamas with their
right. And the business is self-sustaining, right? Because the process that's already in place is generating revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like being
So,
and I'm not saying this as a slight to anybody. It's like a personal trainer. They may not be getting paid until they're getting clients that are actually, working out with them. But then when they're the business owner of a fitness group, then they're, and the clients are consistently coming in, then they're the
yeah,
business. Yeah.
100%. And especially because there's an analogy or there's a step-by-step system that makes you realize where you are.
Right.
And it's called the M1, the M2, and the M3. And if I had a piece of paper, it would make more sense. But just to put it in perspective, so you have the M1 at the bottom and the M3 at the top. So you
Right.
have the M1, which is, this is about 96% of the population. Okay.
Right.
And it's no money, no time. They trade their time for money. That's what it is. Then you
Right.
have the M2, which is 3% of the population. So they have a little bit of money depending on what your mindset is. So they make 100 grand a year, for example, or 90 grand a year. So these are your lawyers, your doctors, your higher profession people.
Right.
And they have they have money, but no time.
Right.
Problem. But then you have the business owners at M3, where they've set up the systems to be able for the business to generate money. And therefore you have your time and money.
Right. Right. How did it feel being that ambitious at 17, 16 years old? And I'm not going to stereotype all 16 and 17-year-olds, but that's not their objective as a whole.
100%.
A lot of adults don't have that as an objective. So your peers, that you've eclipsed, and some people in life, what was it like being that ambitious at that age? And you're having your friends, you're playing, football, or you're playing, doing recreational activities, but you knew that you wanted to go this way in life.
I hear you. So it was quite interesting because people in general, human beings are emotional beings.
Right.
We do everything based on emotion. So the emotion of pain to see my parents working was much greater than the satisfaction of just going out for football for some time.
Right.
So it made me realize. So it wasn't more of a from the outside perspective of people who were watching me would say, yeah, I'm ambitious, but really I was just a man on a mission, as they say.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
So it just made me become more aware. And since I was so young, it did create some subconscious beliefs as well, that I'm too young. How can I earn this money? But then eventually, I saw other people succeeding younger than me, and I was like, what the flip? They're doing that,
Yeah.
and they're young. I have no excuses,
Yeah.
and that's how. But
Right.
another thing that was driving me is that I have no allergies, I have no diseases, I have all my body parts. And this was my mindset, it's a disgrace to the people who do have all those things, who probably are one leg or one arm, but they still succeed in business. It was a disgrace to my own self, but it's also a disgrace to them. So that's why I made it more of an understanding of, I need to do it because it's my responsibility to do it. So it's more about taking the responsibility, I would say.
It's funny, just on a side note, I do martial arts. So one time I did my first jiu-jitsu tournament about, this was a white belt, totally, just figured I would do one.
Yeah.
And so I'm going against a guy, and then I'm like, man, this guy's strong. He's, I didn't do well against him at all. Right. And then, afterwards, speaking with his wife, she was like, yeah, he's legally blind. And I was like, yo, like it blew this guy was so strong. It was nuts how strong this guy was. He grabbed you. It felt like, like I was picking up one of my kids, right? And I just couldn't move, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, and he was like, yeah, he's legally blind. And you're like, that's what you talk about when it's no excuses, right? Here's a guy who, is legally blind, doing a physically demanding sport and is excelling at it, right? And it blew my mind when that hurt. I drove home. I'm just like, he didn't let that limitation stop him. So to your point, you said that there's not going to be a wall up in front of people. And when I was reading, some of your background, I think one of the things you focus on is people's mental state of where they are. So what 100%. Do you think hinders people from doing, being successful or being independently where they have that time and money that you've seen?
It's all about the belief system. It's all about their beliefs. There's certain habits. One is the belief system. That's one core thing. It's how you perceive reality. There's a quote by a very famous person, very rich person as well. I don't remember their name exactly, but they say, if you think it's going to be hard to be successful, And if someone else thinks it's going to be easy to become successful, they're both right. Because it's whatever you believe you can achieve. And it's so powerful because people's belief system, for example, like when I first started, I was saying, oh my gosh, I'm so young. How the hell can I make even 10 grand a month? Like, there's people out there that have been in business for 5 years and I'm just here first month and I'm like expected to get 10 grand a month. But it showed a lot that your limiting beliefs is one thing that prevents you, but it's also your habits. And obviously your beliefs can be habitual as well, but it's also your physical habits, your non-productive habits, that's what we like to call them.
Yeah.
So that makes watching the TV, for example, and that's not even a bad thing. If you want to make it educational, because that's completely fine. But in the first grind, in the first initial process, when you want to become rich, when you want to gain that success, you're going to have an unbalanced life. You're going to have a pretty miserable life. But you have to understand that at the end of the rainbow, there is the pot of gold, or is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
So a lot of people because human beings are known to socialize, they're known to have hobbies. Right. But initially, you need to align your thoughts, feelings, and actions across what you want and what your goal is. And within that first period of time, is so draining on the human conditioning that most people don't succeed. So another thing is persistence, but it's the habits that really form everything. Right. There's actually a quote by Bob Proctor. He says this: people form habits and habits form futures. And it's all about the habitual behavior. And when you understand how to form the habits, like I said, emotional impact and repetition, then you know how to create the right habits for yourself.
I think it's even crazy when I started this podcast, and one of the pieces of advice I've learned early was when you put stuff on calendars and you put your blocks of time, and I know people don't like to do that because they like to kind of just, I got this. But when you actually start putting time in calendars, you'll find out where your time is allocated to. And you'll find out, I really did BS for this amount of time and I didn't do anything productive, right? And it's an eye-opening experience. It really is.
Agreed. And that's also one of the productivity tricks that even my mentor taught me was, she said, Gleston, schedule out every single minute that is on your calendar. From the moment you sleep, your meal times, you're brushing your teeth, have all of that prepared. Because then you see how much time you're allocating towards these things. And it's a massive productivity hack. Right. But then there's another person who create a very, very well thought out system. And if you can do this system, you can do any system. But if you can't do this, you can't do any other system.
Right.
And it goes back to, this person is the richest man in the world yet to date. So this is a guy called Andrew Carnegie. And if you want to go up the lineages, Bob was mentored by Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale was mentored by Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, who knows, for your viewers. And Napoleon Hill was mentored by Andrew Carnegie.
Right.
So going down, that's where I come from as well.
Yeah.
And there was a massive and effective productivity habit or for scheduler that you can implement is write down 6 tasks you're going to do the next day. Not 3, not 2, not 1, 6. And schedule them of importance to your business.
Yeah.
It's so productive because you can't move to step 2 if you haven't done step 1.
Right.
So it forces you and it kicks you out of that procrastination. And another thing that kills procrastination is scheduling that time.
Absolutely.
Because when you see how much time you have, I tell you, you don't have that much time.
No, you don't.
It's quite interesting because we delve into time is non-existent. It's a field. It's quite interesting because we talk about manifestation and how something like instant manifestation is possible, but people don't understand it. So that's why we use the concept of time, because a lot of people ask, how long is it going to take me for me to get to my goal?
Right.
But the question that we ask them, our clients, is how focused can you be?
Right.
That's what.
So you're 19. What's the first impression? And obviously you were younger before you got to this point, and you just happened to age into the, like normal people do age. What was it like when you were walking into rooms and you're ready to close a deal, start a business, tell people, hey, by the way, I'm the guy in charge, not the guy getting you coffee, right? So how did you get received?
So it's a very good question. And I'll tell you why, because it goes back to limiting beliefs. So whatever you feel subconsciously will be imprinted out onto the outer world. That's how it works.
Right.
So just like we have the law of gravity, I'm just going to digress a little bit and I'll come back to that question.
Right.
So as you know, we have the law of gravity. For example, if I was to jump off a building, I'm not floating up in the air. I'm going down.
Unquestionably.
in the same way for you as well. If you were to jump off a building, you're also going down. You're not floating.
I'm probably going a little
And-
faster too because I'm a lot heavier than you, and gravity wouldn't be my friend, at least.
Hey.
Yeah.
But then a lot of people know about the law of gravity, but they don't know the other laws. And so one of the laws, attaching it to the subconscious mind, is called the law of perpetual transmutation. Very, very fancy way of saying a very simple thing. What that law actually means is whatever is impressed on the subconscious mind has to move into form in the outer world.
Right.
So if there was limiting beliefs in my subconscious mind, and initially there was, I would receive feedback of saying, you're 17, you're 18, what can you teach me?
Right.
As soon as I switched that belief, instantly, any room I walked into, I commanded the attention. Because it was a conviction in myself, but you can only gain that through the knowledge of yourself. And what do I mean by that is, Bob said it in a very, very profound podcast when he was a lot younger. And he says, who am I? Because you don't say, because you're not your body and you're not your mind or you're not your hand. He says, hand is not going to be in today. You say, Gleston's not going to be in today. Well, we're not on him either. We can change it.
Right.
But if we say, my name, that's my body, that's my hand, well, who am I?
Right.
And that's so profound. Because when you understand who you are in the essence, that's where you get that conviction and that's where you get that knowing. Because when, for example, if someone wants to say you're an idiot or you're not, let's just say, okay, you look like a very smart guy and you probably are. But let's just say someone says you're dumb. Well, you know intrinsically that I know I'm smart, so that's not going to affect.
So,
in the same way, I knew who I was, and I knew the conviction projected itself out to everyone else.
For sure.
And that's what instantly builds that respect.
Right.
But when you have doubt is another big factor in people's subconscious mind. Because when they're going for that goal, when they're going for that million, they have doubts.
Right.
And it's probably because they don't believe in themselves. It's a belief level. And
That's
so
awesome.
sometimes you have to set a smaller goal to build that confidence.
No question.
And build confidence breeds competence. And with that being said, sometimes you have to set smaller goals in order to get to the higher competence level. And that's what I had to do as well.
So what do you do in your time physically eating wise to marry this all up? Because obviously, based upon the discipline that you and achievements that you've had, you have to be both physically as well as dietary wise discipline as well too. Because most of the time I hear when people are successful like that, they marry all that together.
100%. And there's a lot of agendas that are pushed out with certain food aspects as well. For me, I'm on a different path, and a lot of people may not agree with what my dietary requirements are.
Yeah.
For me, I eat meat 3 times a week, but I'm slowly transitioning into a vegetarian diet. And that's because where I want to go is more on a spiritual path. And so one of the places I see myself as a spiritual master. And that's how I see myself, understanding vibrations, frequency, and all these different things, and being highly connected to that source that people talk about. Some of you may label it as God, others higher power or the universe. I want to align myself with that.
Right.
And some of you have probably understood that the meat industry meat is great, don't get me wrong. I have no issue with meat.
Right.
But from what I have observed from other spiritual masters, they don't tend to really have meat. And that's because, and I'll tell you why, it's because everything's energy. It's all about energetic transfer. So when you probably heard the quote, "You are what you eat," it's very powerful. And I'll tell you why, because, for example, when they slaughter the pig, that pig has fear. And the energy around that, the carcass even, the energy around that meat is fear-based. And when you have that meat, you instill fear into yourself as well. That's why I try to strive for a plant-based diet. For example, there used to be a couple of things that I used to like. I used to love pork in some people they cook it in India. Right. But then there was some time, I think this was about 6 months ago, my mum brought some of this specific food that I love about pork, and I just couldn't eat it. I just looked at it, I felt the energy of fear, and I just couldn't eat it.
Wow. And
from that point onwards, I decided, I need to go more vegetarian.
Right.
Because this energy transfer is just too much for me to handle right now.
Right.
And it doesn't align with what I want. So therefore, I just decided to cut out meat as much as possible, especially pork.
Okay, good for you. I'll save my eating habits for the next episode. What I can tell you though, and just from my limited experience of sometimes changing my diet, man, you feel so much better when you start kicking out things that you're not supposed to really be having in large quantities, right? And we're gluttons, right? So we see a larger plate, we feel obligated to fill out that entire plate, right? So because you're trained to do that, when in reality you were perfectly fine and full, and then you get guilted throwing away stuff off that full plate, so you eat more. So it's crazy.
It's quite interesting because I grew up with a lot of Africans myself, like Nigerians, Ghanaians. Those were my main, because in the London, UK, where I went to school, it was predominantly a lot of Africans.
Right.
And so I grew up on jollof rice, which was a big one, or even plantain, or all these different, like gusu soup or soup. And I realized that each different culture has a different texture behind it, but also a different sort of energy behind it as well. Because, for example, when you go to a restaurant, anyone can cook a nice meal.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between each different meal from each different restaurant. And the key product is love. And you probably hear it in movies and stuff like that. But the energy of love makes people want to come back more. Because if you prepare the food quite nicely, especially because I know how the aunties do it, the Nigerian aunties, they cook with love, they cook with passion, and the food just tastes so much more better. And my mom does the same with Indian foods. It's really profound in that way.
I think a lot of times people treat everything transactionally, right? Like they go to the window, they grab, they drive off. They go to the window, they go, they drag off, or they're at home. And what you just said right there, when people I want this to have a certain texture to it. I want this to have a certain flavor that kicks in. People always, it's amazing that you actually, when I start thinking about what I cooked and eat, I'm just like, you know what? I really just kind of I'll go watch the TV until I know it's been 30 minutes, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And we become very transactional with what we eat. So that was one of the interesting questions that I wanted to ask you about. What do you do now? I saw you won some awards, that you were honored with. I didn't know what that was about because I'm, across the pond. So what were those awards you won?
It's actually quite a funny story because where the event was being held was the same place I met the host and the organizer of the event, which was quite interesting.
That's awesome.
And this is where God has a big role to play. And what happened was I went to a business event with a previous business partner of mine.
Right.
And we were about to leave. And God said, don't leave. Look back.
Right.
So I looked back. And I saw this woman. I saw the host of the event. And just from her energy alone, I knew that she was something significant. There's something more about her. So I went to have a conversation. And next thing I found out, she is quite a big businesswoman. She does events all around the world in all sorts of things. But she's all about empowering people for who they are and all about leadership, all about those sort of roles. And I kept in contact with her. And next thing I received an email saying, Gleston, you've been nominated for an award. I said, really? And I'm just in shock. I'm like, what did I do? And I don't want to, I never want, this isn't, for me, I consider it an achievement.
Right.
But I'm just so grateful to have it so that it allows me to reach more people. That's all I care about.
Yeah, for sure.
People like reaching other people.
Right.
But for me, the award was actually called the Young Man of the Future Award.
I saw that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I, from what I remember, the main values is discipline and leadership. And I just see it as a sign from God saying, Justin, you're doing well. That's how I see it. Because it's not every day that anyone gets an award like that, especially just from an email. So it was quite, it took me back. Initially, I thought, is this real right now? Did someone just get my email?
Yeah.
But I found out, and from that point onwards, I'd done a bit of my own due diligence, and I found out it was real. So, and then I went.
Well, your accomplishments, like I said, speak for themselves. Your story is inspiring, and I think that time management is something a lot of people lack. I'm not gonna. You can throw my hat in the ring on that as well too. But one of the reasons I started this podcast was to talk to people like you, right? Was to get out and find out what are not only to be inspired, and the randomness of nothing is really a vessel to seek information, whether you're from Texas, I'm just outside of Detroit, Michigan, all the way across the world, right? And it's important that, one thing that is consistent is the stories that everybody keeps telling me who do things like you. Manage your time, eat well, and have a clear and concise mindset of what you want to accomplish. And that's been universal across the board with all the people I've been talking to.
Agreed. And the thing is, it's very easy to say, do this and do that. But the thing is, some people need a bit more than that. I need to understand why. Because a lot of people, like, they say, I don't really want to manage my time. That's extra effort. And that's completely fine if that's a current belief. For example, I had the belief system that I would never stop eating meat. Never. You go back 1 year, you would see a completely different Gleston. Completely.
Right.
But it was just one, because I listened to my mentors. I think that's the main thing as well. Bob said this. He said, if you want to become successful, or if you just even, if maybe not even success, but whatever your definition of success is. But he said, if you want to be good at something, find someone who has the results that you want. Exactly. And the second step is, and do exactly what they tell you to do. Two things. And from that, because in your current awareness, you're not going to know what is right and wrong. For example, if like the best tennis player, if he told you, and if you found him and he said, yeah, you know what, I'll train you. And he said, start hitting these tennis balls that come at you blindfolded. And you say, no, what sort of student are you?
Nothing. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, obviously, Kobe Bryant passed away, but they talked to Michael Jordan. I think it was his personal trainer, Tim Grover. And he said so many people would contact Michael, or contact him to get in touch with Michael, younger players. And they would say, well, how do I get what he got? And then they would fall off when they realized what it took. Right. And very few people, a select few people, Kobe was one of them, that were like, I'm going to do exactly what this guy did. I'm going to shamelessly copy this guy's habits and still create myself to be a completely original person at the exact same time. It's mind-blowing when you actually think about it. Because the information's out there, right?
There is. And the problem is that we have a lot of information out there. But one thing to guide your viewers if they want to get successful is always look at, one, find someone who has the results that you want. But the second thing is, this is when I was studying, for example, in the same analogy that you use with basketball. I'll be honest, I don't watch basketball. I don't know anything about basketball. I'll put that out there.
Right.
But to put in perspective is that you can copy some habits from other people if they have the success.
Right.
But then it's always, so when I was researching, I wanted to understand, who do I study? Because there's a difference between receiving information from a source and studying them. Receiving information is just...
Absolutely.
Exactly. 100%. It's just watching a video of just one thing that they've done. That's just what receiving information from one source is. But studying is another level. Studying is, you watch every single one of their videos. You see how they embody their lifestyle. Right. You see how they walk, the way they talk, the way they love, everything. And that's what studying was. And my mentor said this, because I was actually wanted to study a very, very young entrepreneur who's a multimillionaire. I think he's a 9-figure earner now. And he spoke, it was all about the truth, and he spoke pure facts, and he was just on the alignment of me. And he was 26. And my mentor said, Gleston, this information hasn't been around for 26 years. This information has been around for centuries.
Right.
Find out what his source is and go as far as possible. That's where it started. Because do you know the game Chinese Whispers?
No, I've never actually heard of that. No.
Okay. So I remember when I was in primary, this was a big game when we used to play around the table. You probably will know it. But it's basically someone has something in their mind. They whisper it to one person right next to them. They whisper it all around. And to the last person...
It's changed.
Exactly. And they say out the phrase that they received. However, it's completely different to the original source. And what happens is that, and this is not throwing shade on anyone, because this is just an unawareness of most people, is that everyone is so desperate to teach as much as they can.
Right.
So when they receive information, they want to teach it.
Right.
But then, how can they teach it if they don't have the results in their own life?
For sure.
And it's like baking a cake. You go to a baker. They show you how to bake a cake. Perfect. And then you memorize it, but you never bake a cake. And you're so desperate to teach. So you're going to give that recipe to someone else. That may not work.
Right.
And you're not living testament. So what happens is the original baker can get his own reputation tarnished and say your recipe doesn't work
Exactly.
because someone else that he taught shared the information that probably wasn't correct because
Right.
he'd never himself. And that's what happens when it comes to wealth and information. Now, no one knows. There's so much information out there that no one really knows where the information is. To put it in perspective, always look into lineages. Always. For example, you have Rockefeller. One, I think that still today is one of the biggest family dynasties or dynasties that still last for centuries.
Right.
But you also have Andrew Carnegie's lineage of passive development. For example, Napoleon Hill, Nightingale, Bob, and my mentors and me. That's another rich lineage as well. So it's all about looking into lineages, because when you understand what is a rich lineage, because when you say who was the richest man in the world, and you go into those depths,
Right.
you start to find out, okay, cool. If this guy was the richest, I need to listen to this person.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. You can apply that to all facets of life too, but particularly when it comes to, the success that you want to mimic. The books are out there. The documentaries are out there. The people, they didn't just make a statue or name buildings after somebody because they thought of them off the top of their head, right? They did it because they created something that's lasted that long that was worthy of those achievements. That's
100%.
amazing. That's amazing. So, I could talk, pick your brain for hours, man, but I want to be very respectful of your time. Did you have any questions for me? I'm honored to have you as a guest.
Very good question. Look, I would love to know, for your viewers to know you a bit better, is what is your next goal? What is your biggest goal that you want to achieve? Or if you were to, or even a better question is, if you're on your deathbed and you look back at your life, what is the one main thing that you want to have achieved in your lifetime?
I want to make sure that people were inspired and took risks in life. When some of us aren't fortunate enough to have, our and it doesn't matter. It's funny because I'll take a step back, because we all have a time. It's the one date we can't change, modify, or ask to get extended because of certain circumstances, right? So I think the most important thing is I heard a really good quote where they said, what is it? Today was tomorrow, right? So in other words, I'm going to do that tomorrow. Well, no, today is tomorrow. So if you have that mentality, and it coming kind of close with this podcast, I thought of every reason why not to do it, even though I thought I could be good at it. And it was because of self-doubt, maybe lack of full tech knowledge of, I don't have these resources because you have to get all this fancy equipment, yada, 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 yada. And so you start putting that doubt in your head that it's not possible to have a podcast, have guests on there, have people interested in listening to what you have to say. Once you actually get those bad thoughts out of your head and you just do it, it is the best feeling in the world. It is the absolute best feeling in the world. So what I would say, what I want to be remembered as, somebody who was willing to take risks because they realized that life is short.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure you will be inspired by that. 100%.
I really appreciate it. And like I said, the reason I started this show was to talk to people like you, because the best thing about it is the best answers are not just the person in the mirror is not the smartest person in the world.
100%. There's a quote from a billionaire, actually. He says, always be aware of the man in the t-shirt.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Because they have built themselves so well to the point where they don't care what anyone thinks.
Nope.
Because when you get to a billionaire standpoint, no one really cares, and they say, you know what?
Nope.
I don't care.
Right.
I'm trying to sell, say no.
It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So I think, people just, people, and I'll just leave it with this. Oftentimes people look at the finished meal and didn't realize what the ingredients it took to put it together. So you have to be willing to walk through the fire, buy the groceries, unpack it, unthaw it, and then get a finished meal. If you apply that to life like you did, you see the results on the other end. So thank you very much, Gleston.
No worries. I appreciate your time. Very, very grateful.
I appreciate your time, man. I'm sure it's like 10 o'clock over there right now. So thank you.
It's all good. It's all good.
Appreciate you.